The galaxy was breaking apart. Worlds that once shined with light and life now floated as burning ashes in the void. Fleets that claimed invincibility lay shattered, their wreckage drifting across empty space. Whole civilizations had given up, surrendering to despair as enemy armadas carved through their defenses like blades through paper. Hope, once a fragile flame, was almost gone. Whispers spread across star systems that nothing could stand against the tide of destruction. Through all of this chaos, one name was repeated again and again: Earth. At first, aliens mocked it. They laughed at the thought of humans fighting in this war. Humanity was silent, quiet in its corner of the stars, refusing to stand against the storm. Many believed Earth was finished, its people broken, its fleets nothing but rusted shadows. The councils of other races mocked them, calling humans cowards who hid behind words of peace while the galaxy bled. The silence of Earth became a joke told in drinking halls and war rooms. To the powerful, humanity was nothing more than dust waiting to scatter, but silence has its own kind of weight. In the dark corners of broken stations, in the refugee camps drifting between shattered moons, survivors whispered of something hidden. Rumors of a fleet, a war armada that was never seen in public, built in secret far from the eyes of the galaxy. They said humans had not been idle, while others mocked them. They said Earth was preparing for something no one expected. Most dismissed it as lies born from desperation. After all, if humanity had such power, why wait until everything was lost? Why remain quiet while millions of lives were erased? And yet the whispers would not die. They spread like sparks in dry grass, too small to be flames, but too alive to vanish. A trader swore he saw human warships moving in a region where no ships should be. A scout returned shaking, claiming he picked up strange energy signals near the void. But before his message ended, his transmission went silent forever. A smuggler claimed to have carried supplies to a hidden human base deep in a starless sector where no sane captain traveled. Most laughed at him, but his eyes carried a fear no joke could hide. In the grand councils of alien leaders, these stories were dismissed. The galaxy had no room for fantasies. They believed what they saw: shattered colonies, dying fleets, and humanity's silence. To them, humans were finished. But in the hearts of the weak and the broken, the rumor carried a dangerous kind of hope. They asked themselves, what if Earth had been waiting? What if the silence was not weakness but patience? What if the hidden armada was real? Fear began to grow alongside hope. Some alien commanders warned their superiors not to underestimate humans. They spoke of Earth's history, of battles fought when their species was cornered. They reminded others that humans were stubborn creatures, willing to fight long after hope was gone. But the warnings were laughed away. No one wanted to believe that silence could hide strength. No one wanted to admit that the war might not be theirs to control. Meanwhile, in the ruins of lost worlds, strange signals began to appear. They were faint at first, like echoes carried on cosmic winds. Broken satellites picked up distorted transmissions. Patrol ships reported seeing lights flicker in the void where no stars burned. The signals were unmarked, carrying no banner of empire. They pulsed like a heartbeat, growing stronger each day. Refugees huddled together when they heard the stories. Some wept, thinking it was nothing but false hope. Others prayed the whispers were true, that humanity still lived and had not surrendered like the rest. To the soldiers who still fought hopeless battles, the thought of a hidden human fleet was enough to keep them standing one more day. Even the enemies who destroyed worlds began to wonder. For the first time, their victories did not taste sweet. They began to fear the silence, and far away, where no light reached, something moved. In the depth of the void, engines burned quietly, unseen by enemy eyes. Hulls of black steel drifted like shadows against the stars. Hundreds of warships waited in silence, their weapons charged, their crews watching and listening. Humanity's silence was not weakness, it was preparation. And the void was about to answer the galaxy's despair. But the galaxy did not know that yet. For now, they only felt the fear growing in their hearts, a fear they laughed at during the day, but whispered about at night. They told themselves the humans were broken, but a deeper voice whispered something else. When hope faded, Earth was still watching. And when Earth moved, nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy was falling apart. But in the darkness, something was coming. Something that could turn despair into fire. Something that could make the mocking laughter of the powerful turn into screams of fear. The void was no longer empty. It was waiting, and soon everyone would know the truth. The rumors would not die. They spread faster than light, whispered in refugee camps, and carried by traders who crossed ruined star systems. Everywhere people spoke of it, humanity had a secret. Somewhere in the endless black, Earth had built something. Most laughed at the idea, but the fear in their eyes betrayed them. For if the rumor was true, it meant that the galaxy was not as safe as the conquerors believed. In the farthest reaches, where no empire claimed control, strange things began to happen. Patrols disappeared without a trace. Ships reported ghostly shadows moving through the void, then went silent. Scanners flickered, showing readings that made no sense. Energy spikes, movements too fast for known ships, signals that sounded like heartbeats echoing across the stars. Commanders brushed it off as broken equipment or tricks of the mind. Yet the reports continued, piling higher until even the most stubborn leaders grew uneasy. Among the refugees, hope began to bloom again, fragile and trembling. Families hiding on shattered moons lit small fires and told their children that humans would come. "The Armada is waiting," they whispered. "When the time is right, they will return." For those who had lost everything, the thought was enough to keep them breathing another day. But the enemy empires did not like whispers. They ruled through fear, and whispers of resistance threatened their power. Scouts were ordered into the void to hunt down the source of the rumors. Fleets were sent to search the dark sectors, sweeping the emptiness with beams of light. They found wreckage, burned satellites, and echoes that mocked them. But the one thing they wanted, the humans, remained hidden. Every search returned with nothing but silence. Silence, and a strange sense that something was watching them. For the first time, the invaders felt small in the dark. Captains spoke quietly to their crews, wondering why their scanners failed in certain regions. Soldiers claimed they saw dark shapes, moving just outside the light of their ships. No proof was found, but unease spread like poison. They had crushed empires and burned worlds, yet now they could not sleep without glancing into the shadows. In the grand halls of alien councils, leaders argued. Some demanded every resource be used to hunt down this so-called armada. Others laughed, insisting humanity had nothing left. "They hide because they are broken," one commander declared. "If they had power, we would have seen it already." Yet even as they mocked, they refused to send their fleets near the darkest regions of the void. Their words were sharp, but their actions betrayed fear. Meanwhile, small sparks of resistance began to stir. On worlds where the enemy had enslaved survivors, secret groups began to form. Their only hope was the rumor of humanity. They painted human symbols on walls at night, leaving messages like prayers. "The fleet is coming." Even those who had never seen Earth began to believe in it. To them, humanity became more than a species. It became a promise that despair would not last forever. Then the signals grew stronger. What had been faint echoes now came clear and sharp, like drums in the deep. Entire systems picked up the strange transmissions. They were not words, not yet, but they carried rhythm and power. Scientists tried to decode them, but no one could explain why the signals felt alive. To those who listened, it was as if the void itself had found a voice. The enemies panicked. They increased patrols, doubled defenses, and ordered scouts to search again. Yet the more they searched, the less they found. And every time they returned, the whispers grew louder. "The humans are coming." Some alien soldiers even began to desert, choosing exile over facing what might rise from the black. In the shadows, where the galaxy's eyes could not reach, the truth was awakening. Ships built in silence stirred, their engines burning without sound. War machines waited, armed with weapons that had never been tested in open battle. Pilots trained in secret, their eyes sharp, their silence colder than steel. Humanity had not been idle. While the galaxy bled and mocked them, Earth had been building, hiding, and preparing. Still, the galaxy did not know this. To them, it was only whispers, only fear. But fear is powerful. Fear spreads faster than fire, and once it takes root, it cannot be erased. The invaders, who once laughed at the thought of humans, now held their breath when they traveled near the void. Their victories no longer felt certain. Their fleets no longer felt unstoppable. And then, in one quiet system, on the edge of nowhere, something happened. A scout ship recorded a shadow, long, sharp, and massive, sliding past the stars. Before it could send more, the transmission cut out. The last image showed what looked like the outline of a warship, larger than any known design. The signal was weak, but it was enough. The rumor became more than a whisper. It became a warning. The galaxy began to tremble. Survivors prayed louder. Enemies tightened their grips. Everyone watched the void, waiting for the silence to break, for in the emptiness something stirred. The forgotten fleet was real, and soon the galaxy would learn what humanity had been hiding. The silence did not last. For months, the galaxy had lived with rumors, clinging to the idea that Earth's hidden strength was more than just a story. For months, enemy fleets scoured the void, desperate to prove the whispers false. Yet the more they searched, the more they failed. What they could not find, they began to fear. And then at last the void answered. It began with a light, not the warm glow of a star, not the fire of battle, but something different, sharp, cold, and deliberate. On the edge of a dead system where no suns burned, the blackness tore open. Space itself seemed to ripple like water, bending to a force no one could explain. The first watchers thought it was a storm, some cosmic event, until shapes began to emerge. Shadows stretched into steel. Hulls carved from black metal slid silently into reality. The first ship was massive, dwarfing anything the alien empires had built. Its edges were sleek, its armor lined with faint blue patterns that pulsed like veins of light. Behind it came another, then another, until dozens filled the emptiness. Each one bore no flag, no call sign, no sound. They moved in perfect silence, their engines leaving trails of ghostly light in the void. To those who watched, it was like seeing ghosts rise from the grave. Humanity's ghosts. Panic erupted across the listening posts that caught the first images. Messages flew between fleets and councils. It's real. The humans built it. Some claimed it was impossible. Others argued the ships must be stolen from some forgotten empire. But no one could deny what their eyes saw. Earth's silence had ended, not with words, but with steel. On border worlds, alien civilians gathered in crowded squares, staring at shaky broadcasts. Some cheered, daring to believe the nightmare of defeat might finally break. Others trembled, afraid of what the humans would do with such power. For the first time in decades, the galaxy felt both hope and dread at the same moment. In enemy war councils, fear turned into rage. "It is a trick," commanders shouted. "They cannot fight us. They have hidden because they are weak." Yet none of them volunteered to face the fleet alone. Orders were given to gather armadas, to crush the humans before their presence spread. Still, every commander hesitated. None wanted to be the first to test the strength of ships born in silence. The human fleet remained wordless. No speeches, no transmissions, no demands. They moved like shadows, slipping from one system to another, always at the edges, always watching. Then, without warning, they struck. The first battle was short. An enemy patrol of 12 warships fell upon the humans, expecting an easy kill. But the moment their weapons fired, the void lit up. Human warships moved like hunters, silent and fast. Their guns spoke in bursts of white fire that tore enemy shields apart in seconds. Missiles the size of towers left trails of burning light before slamming into enemy hulls. In less than 5 minutes, the alien patrol was nothing but debris. The human fleet disappeared again before reinforcements arrived, leaving only silence and wreckage behind. The galaxy shook. Fleets that once crushed whole empires without effort now faced a nightmare that moved too quickly, hit too hard, and left without a trace. The invaders had fought many species, but never like this. Humanity's silence was no longer weakness, it was strategy. They had hidden until the right moment, and now every shadow in space carried the weight of fear. Across refugee colonies, cheers erupted. Families wept in joy, pointing at the skies, saying the humans had returned. Survivors of broken empires sent messages toward Earth, not knowing if they would be heard, begging to fight at their side. The story of the hidden armada was no longer rumor. It was truth, but humanity did not reveal itself fully. The armada kept moving in silence, striking here and there, vanishing before anyone could respond. They were not just fighting, they were testing, measuring their enemies, finding weaknesses, preparing for something larger. Alien commanders tried to adapt. They sent fleets of hundreds against what they believed were smaller human forces. Yet again and again the battles ended the same way, quick, brutal, and hopeless. Human ships moved with precision, as if every strike had been planned years before. Their weapons did not waste fire. Their defenses adapted too fast for alien tactics to matter, and their silence only deepened the terror. For those who survived, one truth became clear. This was not the return of a broken race. This was the awakening of a power the galaxy had mocked too long. Humanity had not been silent because it was weak. It had been silent because it was waiting. In the dark halls of alien councils, fear finally broke through pride. Some demanded peace, begging to send envoys to Earth before the war turned against them. Others insisted on full extermination, desperate to prove that humanity was still mortal. But beneath their arguments lay a single question that none could ignore. If this was only the beginning, what was coming next? And still the humans said nothing. No broadcasts, no threats, no explanation. Only warships drifting out of the void, striking without mercy, vanishing into silence. The forgotten armada was awake. The galaxy had wanted to laugh at Earth's silence, to mock its weakness. But now every shadow carried the same thought. When hope faded, humanity did not die. It prepared, and now it was ready. The silence of the void was gone. Across the galaxy, no one could deny it anymore. Earth's hidden fleet was real. The mysterious warships that had emerged from the darkness were not illusions, not rumors, not tricks of desperate survivors. They were steel and fire, moving like predators through space. And now they were preparing for something greater. The galaxy waited, holding its breath. The first true strike came without warning. It began in a border system where the enemy had built a fortress world, a place meant to remind everyone of their dominance. The planet's skies were filled with defense satellites, and massive battleships circled above like vultures. Billions lived under the boot of their rule, too broken to resist. For years, the fortress had been untouchable. But on that day, shadows came out of the void. Sensors caught nothing at first, only strange distortions at the edge of the system. Then in a flash, dozens of human warships appeared. They fell upon the defenses like a storm. Missiles streaked through the dark, slamming into satellites and tearing them apart in bursts of fire. Human cannons burned white across the black sky, cutting enemy ships to pieces before they even understood what was happening. The defenders tried to respond, but their lines crumbled too fast. On the surface of the planet, slaves and prisoners lifted their heads as the night lit up. The sky burned with explosions, and for the first time in years, the banners of their oppressors fell. People whispered one word over and over: humans. The armada had come. The battle did not last long. The alien fleet had numbers, but numbers meant nothing against precision. Human ships moved in perfect formations, turning battles into executions. Their strikes were clean, efficient, ruthless. The enemy fought desperately, but within an hour, the fortress system was broken. The planet was free, its skies cleared, its defenders reduced to ash. Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire. Entire empires shook as reports poured in. Humanity had not only returned, it had taken a world. And not just any world, but one the enemies had declared invincible. Pride shattered. Fear deepened. The galaxy began to realize this was no scattered rebellion. This was war, and humanity was leading it. In the enemy councils, panic erupted. Commanders argued over how such a strike could be possible. Some swore humanity had been given help from another hidden power. Others claimed Earth had discovered technologies no one else understood. But whatever the truth, one fact was undeniable. The humans had moved from shadows to fire. They had struck directly at the heart of the enemy, and they had won. Survivors from the fortress system told stories that only added to the terror. They spoke of human ships that did not hesitate, of weapons that seemed to cut through shields like paper, of tactics so sharp that every move felt predicted. Some claimed to have seen human marines on the ground, silent figures in black armor, moving with machine-like precision. Wherever they walked, the enemy fell. To the enslaved, they looked like saviors. To the oppressors, they looked like nightmares. And yet, through all of this, Earth itself said nothing. No broadcasts, no demands, no declarations. The fleet struck, freed, destroyed, and vanished. The silence was worse than words. If humanity had spoken, at least the galaxy would have known their intent. But in the silence, imagination filled the void. And imagination was always crueler than truth. Every empire now feared that Earth would come for them next. Every admiral wondered if the void hid fleets even larger than the one already seen. In refugee colonies, hope roared back to life. Families that had given up now prayed to live long enough to see humanity's rise. Children drew images of human ships on the walls of ruins. Soldiers of broken races swore oaths that if the humans allowed it, they would join the Armada, fighting under Earth's shadow. For the first time in decades, the galaxy dared to believe in freedom again. But the enemies were not ready to surrender. If anything, the strike made them more dangerous. They gathered massive armadas, combining fleets from across their empires. Planets were stripped of resources, all to fuel the war machine. They promised their people that humanity would be crushed, that the Armada would burn, just like every empire before it. Yet behind their anger lay fear, a fear they could not hide, even from themselves. The humans knew this, and they welcomed it. Silence was no longer just preparation. Now silence was a weapon. Every time the Armada vanished into the void, enemies trembled, wondering where they would appear next. And each time they appeared, they struck like lightning, breaking fleets, toppling strongholds, and disappearing before retaliation could arrive. The first strike at the fortress world was only the beginning. Humanity was not fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for dominance. The void was no longer empty. It belonged to them. As the fires of war spread, the galaxy finally began to understand what the whispers had meant. Hope had not died. It had been waiting in the silence, waiting in the void, waiting for the moment when humanity would unleash its fury. Now that moment had come, and the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy had thought the first strike was shocking enough. One fortress world gone, one mighty fleet shattered. It should have been the end of it. But it was not the end. It was only the beginning. Humanity had bared its teeth, and now the galaxy would see what vengeance looked like when it came from Earth. The silence of the void no longer carried uncertainty. Now it carried dread. Whole fleets refused to patrol without reinforcements. Captains whispered of dark shapes that stalked them, waiting for the moment to strike. Every shadow became a threat, every signal an omen. The invaders who once crushed worlds with arrogance now looked over their shoulders, afraid that the next flash of light would be their last. Humanity's warships had turned the battlefield into a hunting ground, and the hunters were merciless. In the third month after the first strike, Earth's Armada launched again, this time not against a single system but against three at once. Coordinated strikes erupted across different sectors of space, each carried out with terrifying precision. Fleets guarding supply lines vanished in minutes. Shipyards burned under sudden bombardments. Enemy colonies, once used to enslave survivors, were liberated as human marines descended like shadows from the sky. The liberated spoke of warriors in black armor, with glowing visors, moving with silence and discipline that frightened even those they saved. They carried no banners, no speeches, no grand declarations. They fought, they freed, they destroyed, and they vanished. Some survivors begged for answers, for words of reassurance, but the humans gave none. To them, silence was not cruelty, it was strategy. Let the galaxy speak for them. Let fear spread their legend. Alien councils descended into chaos. Empires that had once mocked Earth now shouted warnings across their borders. They blamed one another for allowing humanity to survive so long. They accused each other of secretly aiding the humans. Alliances fractured under suspicion. The galaxy was cracking, not just from human strikes, but from the terror humanity planted in their enemies' hearts. One commander, desperate to calm his people, made a speech broadcast across his empire. "The humans are weak," he declared. "They hide in the void because they fear us. They strike only from shadows because they cannot face us directly." His words echoed across thousands of worlds. But 2 days later, his command station was destroyed in a single, precise strike. Millions watched as the transmission cut off in fire. The Armada did not answer his words with speeches. They answered with silence and ash. And still, Earth itself said nothing. No leader appeared. No council spoke. The humans who commanded the fleet did not demand territory, did not declare war in the old ways. They did not need to. The war was already theirs. In refugee camps, hope turned into devotion. People carved human symbols into walls, treating them like sacred signs. On broken worlds, resistance fighters raised human flags above ruins, even if no humans were present. Entire populations began to believe Earth was not just another species, but a force of destiny, sent to bring justice where none remained. But hope was not the only thing rising. Vengeance drove the Armada, and vengeance is never gentle. For every liberated world, there was an enemy world reduced to rubble. For every colony freed, a stronghold was destroyed beyond recovery. Entire fleets that once boasted of crushing empires were erased from history, their wreckage left drifting as warnings. The message was clear. Humanity had endured humiliation, silence, and mockery. Now it was their turn to answer, and they would answer with fire. Enemy leaders began to beg for answers. Some even sent envoys into the void, pleading for parley. None returned. Whether they were ignored or destroyed, no one knew. Humanity's silence was more terrifying than any threat. A species that had been mocked for being weak was now unstoppable, and no one could predict their limits. In the dark, the Armada continued to grow. More ships emerged from hidden docks, more weapons came online. The galaxy had no idea how large the fleet truly was. Some said hundreds of ships, others whispered thousands. Each new strike seemed to reveal more, as if the Armada was endless, as if Earth had been building for centuries, waiting for this very moment. One fact became clear. The humans were no longer defending themselves. They were attacking. The enemy had tried to erase Earth from history. Now Earth was erasing them. System by system, world by world, humanity's vengeance spread. And yet, through the fire and blood, a terrible question began to rise. If this was what humanity unleashed after being mocked and cornered, what would they become when their vengeance was complete? Would they stop when their enemies were gone? Or had the silence of Earth turned into something else? Something greater, something even the galaxy itself might not survive. For now, the galaxy could only watch. Watch the skies burn. Watch the void light up with fire. Watch as humanity, once dismissed as weak and fragile, returned as a storm of vengeance. And everywhere across every world, survivors whispered the same truth. When hope faded, humanity did not fall. Humanity became vengeance, and the stars would remember it forever. The galaxy had changed. The old order, once proud and unshakable, was falling apart under the silent storm of Earth's Armada. Empires that had ruled for centuries now trembled like children. The void itself seemed to whisper of humanity, as if every shadow carried the threat of their return. The Armada struck where it wished, crushed what it chose, and vanished before anyone could respond. No one could stop it. No one even dared to try. Entire fleets that once filled the skies were now drifting wrecks. Fortress worlds had burned, their defenses torn apart like paper. Supply lines collapsed, and soldiers who once marched with arrogance now deserted in droves. The enemies of Earth were not just losing battles, they were losing their will to fight. Humanity's vengeance had broken more than ships. It had broken the spirit of the galaxy. In the great councils of alien empires, silence replaced shouting. Leaders sat in fear, staring at maps of the stars where whole sectors had gone dark. They tried to make plans, but their words carried no strength. They sent envoys into the void, begging for negotiations, offering truces and deals. None returned. Humanity did not answer with words. Only ships, only fire, only silence. On the ground, whispers spread faster than fear. Whole populations prayed to see the Armada in their skies. Refugees carved human symbols into the walls of ruins. On worlds freed by Earth, survivors gathered at night, staring at the stars, waiting for another flash of light that meant their protectors had come. Humanity had become more than a species. They had become a myth, a shadow that promised both vengeance and salvation. The enemy empires no longer asked how many human ships there were. They asked how many were left of themselves. Every time they thought they had found the Armada's limits, more ships appeared. Some swore the fleet was endless, that Earth had been building for centuries in silence. Others whispered darker fears, that the humans had tapped into something beyond the galaxy, that their silence had not only been strategy, but transformation. And then came the moment that broke the last chains of doubt. A gathering of enemy fleets, larger than anything assembled in generations, launched into the void. They believed their numbers could finally overwhelm Earth's armada. They gathered thousands of warships, dreadnoughts armed with the most powerful weapons in existence, and set out to end the human threat once and for all. They never returned. Weeks later, fragments of their fleet drifted into border systems, twisted and burned beyond recognition. Some ships bore scars of weapons no one had ever seen before. Others seemed to have been torn apart from the inside. Survivors were few, and their words made no sense. They spoke of a wall of fire in the void, of human ships moving like phantoms, of death coming so fast that no command could be given. The largest armada in living memory had vanished into nothing. The galaxy knew then resistance was finished. Across the stars, silence fell. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of surrender, the silence of fear. Whole empires withdrew their fleets, abandoning conquered worlds to save themselves. Generals refused orders. Soldiers laid down their arms. No one wanted to face the humans again. And in that silence, Earth finally spoke. Not with words, with an action that echoed louder than any speech. The Armada entered the central systems of the galaxy. No fleet stopped them. No empire dared resist. The warships of Earth spread across the skies of countless worlds, their black hulls glowing with silent power. Then in unison they stopped. They hovered above cities, orbiting planets, filling the void with their presence. And still, they said nothing. The meaning was clear. The void belonged to humanity now. Across the galaxy, the people waited, breathless, for Earth's command. Would they demand tribute? Would they enslave their enemies? Would they burn everything, the way they themselves had once been burned? But no command came, only silence, and that silence was worse than any threat. Because in it, the galaxy realized the truth. Earth did not need to demand. They did not need to speak. Their power was beyond question. Their vengeance had already been written into the stars. The enemies who had mocked humans were gone. The empires that had ruled through fear now lived in it. The survivors, who had prayed for hope, now looked to Earth as the new center of the galaxy. Humanity had risen from the ashes, and in their rise, the old galaxy had ended. But as the Armada drifted silently above conquered space, a question haunted every mind. What comes next? Would Earth rebuild what was broken? Or had their silence become something deeper, something that even they no longer controlled? No one knew the answer. Not the refugees who wept in relief under their ships. Not the soldiers who surrendered without a fight. Not even the leaders who bowed their heads in defeat. All they knew was this: when hope faded, humanity rose. And when Earth's armada burst from the void, the galaxy surrendered not just its fleets, but its future. The void was no longer empty. It carried a single truth across the stars. The void belonged to humanity.